Coming to you live from the KQCK radio station compound, nestled in the beautiful Santan Mountains. Marc J. Victor, world-renowned man of peace and attorney for freedom. In a world of coercion and war, a peaceful man stands tall. Now, for your weekly dose of freedom and peace. A peaceful man stands tall. Ladies and gentlemen, the man of peace himself, Marc J. Victor, brings to you the Attorney for Freedom Show.
Welcome back, everybody. It is the Attorney for Freedom Show, and I am the Attorney for Freedom, Marc J. Victor. It's good to be back. We got a full house here today and lots of things to talk about. I wanted to start, actually I really didn't want to start with guns, but guns are back again, Mike.
Yep.
It looks like we got some kind of early reports coming in that there has been yet another shooting at a school. It looks like this time some student with a shotgun. Wasn't an AR-15. Doesn't look like it was a mass shooting. I don't know. I think both sides are going to be up in arms. Of course, the gun control people will say, "Here's another example. This time we gotta ban shotguns." And
where was that? California?
California.
Yeah, and all the freedom people are going to make the obvious point that we got to start protecting our kids at school. We need to do something. The only way to stop bad guys with guns is good guys with guns. And so, but that's not the worst potential thing that's going on. Also, Vice President Joe Biden came out, I think today or yesterday, and made it clear that, and this shouldn't really be a surprise to anybody, that Barack Obama is intending to use the power of the executive order. It looks like to just sort of, I guess there's no other way to say it other than to try to overrule the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. So I'm sure this is something that the founding fathers probably never envisioned, that a president of the United States would just simply cut an order violating the Second Amendment. But this is when you need the things that the founding fathers envisioned. This is why you have divided government, and this is why you have checks and balances. So you would hope, and in a sense, I'd sort of like to see this happen, because it would out Barack Obama as the gun grabber that he is, that the disrespecter of freedom that he is, and it really would be a good commentary on the nature of our system if the Supreme Court just stood up, all 9 of them. Maybe this is a fantasy, Mike. Or I admit this is probably a fantasy. But wouldn't it be great if all 9 of them stood up and said, that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. There is a Second Amendment. We just passed on it in the Heller case. Citizens have individual right to keep and bear arms, and you can't do away with that by stroke of a pen just because you're the President of the United States.
It just seems to me that now whoever's setting this big thing up, I mean, I think I'm into the conspiracy theory of this whole shooting in the school thing. Now they've got the shotguns. What are they going to bring next? They're going through the gamut of different pistols and rifles so they can try to ban everything. Was it going to be a potato gun next?
22.
And then one of those Nerf guns, and we can get all possible things that shoot anything. Including those little darts, those little ones that stick.
But this could also be something good. I mean, this could be the precursor that we've been looking for. The thing that wakes people up.
I don't see that side.
Well, it could wake a lot of people up, and could start the next revolution.
It's true. It's hard to predict. If you look back at things that sort of touched off the American Revolution. You look at things like Shays' Rebellion, the Whiskey Rebellion, little tax protests here and there. You don't know what the consequences are going to be of these type things, the Stamp Act and things that the King George was doing that were just he may do a certain thing, and then there's a backlash. And so it's true. Maybe Barack Obama issuing an executive order flat out banning guns in America could turn out to be a good thing, because maybe it will wake people up where they say, wait a second, this guy Barack Obama, he really isn't a great American. He really isn't for freedom, and maybe we made a huge mistake putting this guy in office. Maybe we need to get back to the principles that made America great.
And of course, to clarify, it being a good thing means by no way, for the people out there that don't understand, of course a school shooting is not a good thing. Of course.
Oh no, I wasn't talking about.
And of course, no. I know that. Just making sure to avoid 50,000.
I was talking about Obama.
Nut jobs.
Obama signed an executive order. That could be a good thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, that in order to not have guns, would not be a good thing, other than to wake people up to say, "Hey, what is this crap?"
Yeah, we need a revolution in this country. It could, and hopefully, it'll be the kind of revolution that our founding fathers envisioned, which is a revolution in thinking, a revolution between the ears, a wake-up call about the nature of individuals versus the nature of government. And, my attitude is whatever it takes to get people to start thinking about freedom and supporting freedom, because, as I've said many times, we just can't keep marching down the same road we've been marching down. We're going to have a financial collapse at some point. I mean, the government can't keep printing money out of control, spending money out of control, raising debt ceilings indefinitely. And at some point, the Chinese or the Japanese, they stop buying up our debt, and we can't finance the interest anymore, and the whole thing collapses, even if Barack Obama prints up $1 trillion coin and says, here you go. I mean, why stop at $1 trillion coin, right? Why not just print up the $16 trillion coin and deal with the debt right there, and we're out of debt.
How come no one's talking about the pharmaceuticals that these kids are on that do these mass shootings, the drugs that they're taking, the antidepressants, the Xanax, the Oxycontins, the this, the that, and who knows how they're even getting their hands on it. Most of them, their parents are prescribing them, to them. So their doctors and their parents and their teachers are all prescribing them these medications. And most of these shootings that happen, they find out that these kids were on antidepressants of some kind.
This is probably a good time for me to introduce our guest, I would think.
Yeah, who is this woman sitting here
sitting across from us? This is Alma Summer. And she is with
Alma.
I'm sorry, I keep getting that wrong.
Not to be confused with Alma School.
Yes,
there
Alma
you go.
School. See, some people say Alma, some people say Alma. It's just kind of
okay. Potato,
right? Call me potato.
But it's and she is with the Am I saying that right?
Agorist
Marketplace, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. But I want to mention one other thing before we move to that topic. And I was giving a speech this week to a group of what do they call themselves? Patriots, I guess.
Red Mountain Patriots.
The Red Mountain Patriots.
They're Tea Parties.
Yeah, Tea Party people. And, I had to admit something. We talked about this, and we needed to have more of a discussion about this. I think it's true. We do have a culture of violence in the United States.
We do.
We absolutely do. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Mike and I were talking even this afternoon. We've been talking over the last few days. Well, I don't remember these kinds of school shootings when we were growing up.
No, but in public school, they do tell you, you need to learn from history. You need to learn not to repeat this. So you need to learn about this war and that war and this war and that war. And it's constant violence being put into your head. And they tell you the reason you need to learn about it is so that it's not repeated in the future. But look what's happened to our future.
I'll tell you what, Mark. In 1987, I graduated high school. From 85 to 87, I used to clean my shotgun on the tailgate of my truck in the parking lot at lunch.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, things are very different.
Come on.
But I think that it's probably a mistake to try to find any one factor that's responsible for this culture of violence thing. And those who read my article about being a peaceful AR-15 assault rifle owner, and by the way, I know rifles don't assault people. I know people assault people, but I've got sort of a reputation for having titles that annoy people. But I made this point in my article that look. If you look at the countries that are involved in the forefront of the drug war, those are the same countries, regardless of what their policy is in regards to guns. It doesn't matter. If they're involved and meshed in the drug war like we are, like Mexico is, like Honduras and Colombia and Venezuela and all these countries where they're big time producing, transporting drugs. They've got cartels. They have violence out of control. And it doesn't matter if you're Mexico and you've completely banned guns, or if you're the United States that borders it and you have 300 million guns. You have violence out of control. This drug war has created such an unbelievable culture of violence in our country and in other countries involved in the drug war that I don't think we can diminish or stop this culture of violence thing until we end the drug war. And I would really like to see it ended for the right reasons, which are the freedom reasons, the libertarian reasons, the peace reasons, the simple reason that people just own themselves. That's the real reason. But there are other factors. I mean, I can't help but notice, the graphic, unbelievably violent video games that are out there that the littlest kids are playing, or the movies today that are out. I saw a promo the other day where the guy with a chainsaw puts the running chainsaw right next to the neck of a person. This is the promo that's on regular TV. Or the way that we glorify war, the way that we have turned into an unbelievable empire where we're fighting. It seems like everywhere in the world. There's literally like over 100 countries that have our troops in there right now, where we treat this like it's a soccer game. Go USA. Let's go out there and bomb. Let's go out there and kill. Let's go out there and start these wars. I don't think you can ignore that in terms of how it factors into this culture of violence. War is not a soccer game. War is where people die. And so I think if you wrap all this in, and of course there's the big one, which is just really crappy parents, and which is why last week Tracy and I tried to do this show on trying to be responsible parents, because it's really such an important issue. And I was talking this morning with Esther, who's our receptionist at our law firm. You wouldn't believe the number of people who make an appointment, and then Esther fusses with them about what's a good time for them and when it fits into our schedule and this and that. They make an appointment, and then they don't call, and they don't show, and then she calls them back, and then they lie to her and tell her crazy things. We were just talking about this type of thing was sort of unheard of. My mom would have killed me if I had done something like that. But yet it's pretty common. People don't like to take responsibility. I mean, just yesterday I was getting my hair cut, and the person who was cutting my hair says, "Hey, Mark, can I ask you a legal question? You're a lawyer." I said, yeah, I'm a lawyer. She says, "Well, here's what happened. My daughter's car got damaged because her neighboring kid was on a skateboard and was skating down the street and smashed into her car and caused damage." I said, "Well, what happened?" "Well, my daughter went and spoke to the parent, and, of course, what was the reaction, right? You would expect the reaction. What would your reaction be? My reaction would be, wow, my kid did this. I'm so sorry. I feel bad. Go get an estimate. Let me take care of it. I feel horrible about it. I'm going to be responsible, right? And then I'm going to talk to the kid about being responsible. You made a mess. Fix it. Clean it up." But that wasn't the response.
It wasn't me.
The response was, "Well, kids do things and accidents happen, and, good luck."
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was
Sue me.
completely irresponsible. What is it you're teaching your kids?
Well, and accidents are horrible just altogether, because my boyfriend got in one this weekend. A girl pulled out in front of him, and of course, she called her insurance, and he called his, and her insurance is going to take care of it by totaling his car. $2,700, here you go, and now you have a salvage title if you keep your vehicle, whereas the damage is $4,000 to fix, and it's just a bumper. He wasn't hurt. He's okay, just in case you were wondering.
We were wondering.
Accidents happen, but you take responsibility.
Yeah.
Isn't that really what we're talking about? Take responsibility. The liberal crowd that sits out there and says, "Oh, here's a problem out in the world. I'm going to vote for sending more money over there." That's not taking responsibility. That's not even being charitable. That's not even being moral. That's simply imposing your views on your neighbor and forcing them to fund things that you think are important. If you want to help somebody, reach in your pocket and help them. If you don't have money, go help them. Don't use the mechanisms of government and force your neighbor to do things that you think are important and then feel so wonderfully great about yourself, about how you're such a moral, caring, wonderful person. Take some responsibility. Take some responsibility for your votes.
It's easy to be generous when you're using someone else's money.
Absolutely. Where's the reality and where's the self-respect in that? I mean, it used to be a time where people took responsibility, and really, that's a big component of what we're talking about when we say we're for freedom. What does it mean to be for freedom? Individual rights, and I never say individual rights without individual responsibilities. Individual responsibilities come with individual rights, and we're such wimps today in America. We don't want any responsibility. People need to take charge of their lives. It's part of being an American.
Well, all through going through school, you're told what to do. You're even growing up, your parents tell you what to do, and half the time they don't even give you a reason for why they're telling you why you're doing what you're doing. It's just because they say so, and that logic is just doesn't make sense.
And that's where we are today. And that's why we have crappy parents, in my view, because the government has stepped in and taken over the whole area of parenting, from cradle to grave. How you raise a kid, where you send them to school, what's taught in school, what they get for lunch, all the way through to the time they retire. And now health care in between. Everything covered by the government. No decisions for the individual. You just go out, work, and pay your taxes. And we, the government, the people who know all, we will take care of everything. And so parents don't have to be parents anymore. And shame on us in America for allowing this to happen.
You know, when I was 5 years old, I think this probably changed my life. And if everyone had an experience like this, it would probably help out quite a bit. I was sitting on a porch, and I had this Nerf kind of with a Nerf plane with a hard nose on it. And me and my little buddy from next door, cars were going by, and we'd throw it, and it'd just go like down 2 feet in front of us. Well, this one car was going by, and I sailed this thing, and it actually went in the guy's window and pegged him. I mean, it was like 30, 40 feet away.
Wow.
Well, this guy happened to have been a cop.
Oh.
And he got out of the car, and he fully made me think I was under arrest. Well, then my parents came out, and they said, take him in. I swear that was it for me. After about 10, 15 minutes, I was so scared.
You should have been like, show me the law.
Take responsibility.
There's a lot of stuff like that. I can
That's
remember.
what has to be done.
I can remember when I was a little kid back in Holbrook, Massachusetts. My brother and I thought it was really fun to shoot bottle rockets all over the place, and of course fireworks were illegal. And so we had this big giant bag of fireworks, and we were shooting them all over the place. I think we were shooting them at gas stations. I guess we weren't as smart as we should have been back then. But some police officer noticed what we were doing, right? What happens today? They arrest you, they haul you in, you're in juvenile court, something's on your record. You know what this guy did? He made us ride home, and he followed us in the police car. And he made us wake up my mom, who was working nights at the time, and he told her what happened, and he let her deal with it. He let her, as the parent, take care of it. There was no citation that was issued. There's nothing on my record. I didn't go to the juvenile court. It wasn't handled by the government. It was handled by my mom, who spanked my rear end a lot. I mean, I know my mom listens to this show, and she may dispute how many times she spanked me. But, Mom, you spanked me a lot. And the truth is, I probably deserved most, if not all, of those spankings.
No, are you kidding?
And I probably got away with a few without some spankings I deserved. But it didn't kill me. It instilled values in me about making me responsible for my choices and responsible for my actions.
Being spanked?
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding at all.
So you're
to this day, he still
pro-spanker.
gets spanked.
That's interesting.
Well, I'm pro-parents choosing what they want to do in terms of raising their kids.
I have had a very specific belief about spanking my entire life. I was spanked, so I always thought that's what you do. You spank your kids. That's just how you do it.
You know what? And I'll tell you what. At the right time in the right place, there's nothing wrong with a good spanking.
No, see, I completely disagree.
Well, Joe's talking about his wife, so. But you know. But Alma, this right here is the essence and the beauty of a free country, right?
No,
because
I agree.
Parents should be able to make the decisions about how they want to raise their kids.
Absolutely, but I also believe that spanking is violent and that it teaches that violence is okay. And I've come to this belief in just the last year, and I do not support spanking anymore because I believe there are alternative ways to explain to a child what they were doing was wrong, and when you explain it to them so they have an understanding of why they were doing whatever it was that was wrong, now they know, and they know that they didn't just stop doing it because you were going to spank them.
And that may work on some children, but I've seen children that you could do that with, and they're just going to walk all over you. This timeout thing is the biggest joke in the world.
Timeout is silly.
Go stand in a corner for 5 minutes. If they had done that to me, I'd be like, well, there's nothing I wouldn't do.
You'd have built a desk there.
Well, yeah. What's my worst punishment? I'm going to go stand in a corner? Oh, wow, that really hurts. You know?
Well, yeah, and it's just like now you're just being pushed away and from the whole social situation when somebody sticks you in a corner. Now, if you say, you know, what was happening right now wasn't right, or you were being violent, or you did something to hurt another person, or whatever it is, you know, maybe now it's just let's have some quiet time.
And of course, I think there's a difference. There is a difference between spanking and beating.
Oh, sure.
There's absolutely a difference there. And, you know, there needs to be a line. And there are parents who cross that line. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about basically how I was raised. You know, if my mom or dad wanted to make it clear to me that I had done something wrong, that's how they got their point across. And, you know, I will say this. I think I grew up to be a pretty peaceful guy. And in terms of spanking my kids, I think I spanked each one of them probably once. because after that, do you want to deal with that again? Do you want to get spanked again? They say no. Spanked again? They say no. I think they start making rational decisions at some point. It's just kind of like the opposite is true. The kids who whine and crank and cry because they want the candy when the parent gives them the candy and that shuts them up. You just taught them that the way they get the candy is to scream and cry and crank a big fit. And so, I just say, you'll be punished for screaming, and if you don't stop, I'll punish you twice.
Yeah, see, punishing is completely different. You can punish, you can take things away. You can say no movies, no TV, no this, no that, no extracurricular, whatever. But, I think that's what I mean by there's different ways to discipline a child rather than spanking them.
Yeah, like as Mike points out, and this is why sometimes bright line rules are really horrible. We have a tendency in our society to always look for the bright line rule everywhere. What's the rule? Is it black? Is it white? Is it yes? Is it no? And the reality is situations are different, and kids are different, and parents are different, and the entire totality of the circumstances is different. And sometimes you might make a choice that turns out good. There might be a better choice out there. There might be a worse choice, and people learn from sometimes even bad things. And so this is the beauty of freedom, which is that people need to be free for themselves to chart whatever course they think is best, because whatever your situation is, it's different than my situation.
Yep.
And I can tell you what I do and what I think works, and you can tell me what you do and what you think works, and we can try to persuade each other all day long. But at the end of the day, there are lots of things that reasonable people can disagree on. Lots of things.
And I don't have kids yet, but in the near future,
like in Mark's example, and I'm not going to name any names, but he's got a daughter and he's got a son. The daughter, he could just sternly say something to, and that would be all that would be needed. She'd start crying, and that would be the end of it. But he's got a son, a really young son. Name starts with an R. I won't say anything more than that. that would not work with. He would just laugh at you and think that was the funniest thing. You need to be more strict with him, and he's gonna anything short of swatting him on the butt is probably not going to work.
Yeah, and in fairness, Ricky, who you're talking about, is one of the best behaved kids in the house, but he didn't start out that way.
He
started out in a way where he needed a lot of stern guidance and a few spankings. But I think I only spanked the kid once. There are a few times where I said, "Hey, do you want?" And now I just got to look at him.
Yeah.
If I just give him a look, he knows. Don't mess with me.
Well, you're probably very articulate with your children. I'm sure they have very high intellect just because you probably talk to them on an intellectual level.
Well, kids are smart.
Oh, yeah.
They figure out very quickly what's in their interest and what's not in their interest. And I haven't said this on the show, but that's one thing that I think we can bank on. People do what they think is in their self-interest. Now, sometimes they're wrong, right? Sometimes you think turning left is in your self-interest, and really you should have turned right. But people do what they at least perceive is in their self-interest. So really, to me, a lot of life is just trying to align interests together. And just because I do something that's in my self-interest, which is what I try to do all the time, doesn't mean it's against somebody else's self-interest. We people who believe in the free market and freedom and libertarians, cooperation is a win-win. And I don't believe in a fixed pie economy. I think that we can grow the pie, and I don't believe in a zero-sum game. If I win, you lose, or vice versa. We can both win, and really that's the nature of a contract, right? In a contract, Joe has something and I have something, and Joe would rather have what I have, and I'd rather have what Joe has, and so we do an exchange, and Joe's better off after the transaction, and I'm better off after the transaction, and the essence of a good contract is it's a win-win. It doesn't have to be a loser.
All right, let's let Alma tell us a little bit about why she's here today.
Okay. Alma. Tell us what you're doing.
Alma.
Mike will get it by the end of the show.
Yeah, all right, I started a website called agoristmarketplace.com, where if you are an individual who has your own business and you accept alternative currencies to Federal Reserve notes, you can go on this website and get listed for free, and you can connect with other agorists who are also, their goal is to have a state-free business.
Would you like me to flip the phone lines on, Mark?
A business free of the state.
Yeah, let's let her finish explaining what it is she's doing. Then let's get some calls in. Yeah, it's a great idea.
I guess I'm not sure what the demographic of this show is, who's listening, if they know what an agorist is, but I highly suggest you.
Why don't you tell us that?
You Google it before you call.
Yeah, why don't you explain what it is and what you're trying to do?
An agorist is somebody who believes in having a business for themselves that is not controlled by anybody but themselves. So their income is their income. They decide who they do business with, and they decide what currencies they accept. And
sounds like freedom.
That's just what I was going to say. Sounds a lot like freedom. See, before I thought an agorist was somebody who didn't believe in spanking, so I learned something today for sure. Yeah, Joe, let's take some calls, and I think that there's lots of things, and I know Mike came with a list of just things. I don't want to always sit here on our show and talk about how upset we are about how things are going in society, because there's a lot to be negative about. But, I think that whether you're negative about things or whether you're positive about things, or I like to say optimistic or pessimistic as well, that's a choice. I mean, we could sit down and do a show, and I could say, hey, name 10 things to be pessimistic about. You could name 10 for sure. Every single person listening to the show could name 10. But I could also say, hey, name 10 things that you're optimistic about, that you're excited about, that make you happy. And everybody else could name 10. So the question is, what are you going to choose to focus on? And I choose to focus on the things that make me happy, the things that make me optimistic, the things that are going well. And so optimism is a choice. And so let's talk about some things that are going on out there in the freedom world. And there actually are lots of things to talk about that are optimistic. And tell us about the Free State Project.
Well, the Free State Project is something that's been around for a while. It's an idea that people, free market people, libertarians alike, will move to New Hampshire. New Hampshire. No, I lost it there for a minute. We'll move to New Hampshire and set up, take over the state is eventually what they want to try to take over the entire state.
In a peaceful way.
In a peaceful way, yes, not violent.
Through getting elected.
Through getting elected to public offices and things like that, where they will eventually take over in a peaceful way the entire state, and libertarians and people, freedom-minded people will move there and live there voluntarily, non-aggressively with each other. That's a great idea if it can work. It's been, what would you say, 10, 12 years in the making probably this has been talked about?
Yeah, and Pork Fest is the festival that they have every June, and if you're interested in learning more about that, that is a perfect festival to go to. There's probably 1,000 people that camp for a week at Rogers Campground, and I've been twice, and
nice.
I love it. But have you heard of the No Status Project?
I have not.
Tell us about that one.
Well, the No Status Project exists everywhere. It doesn't matter what state or land you live in. It exists where you are, and if you want to host No Status Project events, you can host No Status Project events. There's nobody in charge, no individual, no group of people. And it's that's why we have the Jackalope Freedom Festival.
I was just going to say, and you're involved with another project called the Jackalope Freedom Festival.
Yes, and the Jackalope Freedom Festival was just, it was just an idea waiting to happen, because there's tons of conferences, there's tons of freedom events that you can go to, and you can hear speakers and things like that. But my biggest thing about going to a freedom festival is finding people that are interested in purchasing my service or products so that I can free myself in the future. So the Jackalope Freedom Festival, you can come and you can vend corn dogs or bracelets or whatever your service or product is. You can talk about herbs that you find in nature, or you can have, teach people how to shoot guns, or you can come and do whatever you want. And there's no permission needed. There's no cost to go to the festival. There's no fee of any kind, no registration fee, no camping fee, and no vending fee. So it's complete freedom.
I had to go ahead and turn our phone lines off to get this question out there. And usually I'll take 3 or 4, then turn them off, then ask the questions, and then go back. But Laura, I think this might be the question of the week. Laura from Warren, Rhode Island wants to know, why the heck would you want a business without the help of the state or government? You would sure have a much tougher time staying in business that way.
Wow.
I'm in business.
Wow.
Here I go. I just quit my full-time slave job that I was at for 5 years.
I should send her a prize.
I designed cellular towers for a living, and I just quit at the end of the year to be a free human being and work for myself.
What she's saying there is, without the government, how would we get our shoes?
Right, and here's what we need to do, Laura. For you, we're going to do you a special favor today. You're going to watch this whole show, and watch the last few as well. But we want to teach you why. We want you to understand why that this is a good idea. That you don't need the state or government taking your money and taking your... Go ahead, Mark, please.
It kind of goes along with these people who think that the government's out there creating jobs, or that the government can go out there and strengthen the economy or something along those lines. The government doesn't create jobs. The private sector creates jobs. Companies, people who venture capital with one purpose in mind, which is to make more money, they create jobs. Creating jobs is a side effect of what they do. It helps them make more money. There's nothing wrong with that. And, when the government goes out and taxes people and then collects money and then spends it and starts building roads, yeah, sure, it looks like they're creating jobs, but they're really not, because they're taking that same money right out of the economy. And what you see is the people working on the roads and on the projects, and what you don't see is the money that was taken from the people that is now not being used to buy things that they actually wanted, like suits or vacations or whatever else. And so there's less commerce going on the other side. The only way to really create jobs is create more wealth, which is what the private sector does. Let people take their money and venture it into the marketplace with the hopes of making more money and starting businesses, and that's how you create jobs. I mean, I started my law firm many years ago, and I although I love the idea that I create jobs, I didn't actually start the law firm with the thought in mind, man, I can't wait to get out there and create jobs. What I thought was, man, I got this huge student loan debt now, and I need to start making some money to pay it off, and I want to support my family, and I want to, be a successful guy and maybe buy a car that I can put gas in and it'll actually not break down for a while.
And one of the businesses that I started is Unschooling Arizona. So
tell us about that.
Oh, okay. Well, I have one little girl. She's 5, and her mother did not want to put her into a forced curriculum. She is struggling a little bit with learning.
And she's not your daughter?
No, she's not mine.
That's what I was confused about. I was like, her mother? I was, okay.
Oh, yeah. No, she is part of my job. I have her every day, and she is currently learning to read and write. That is the biggest thing that we are focusing on right now. And Unschooling Arizona basically just means that there's no forced curriculum. The child or individual human gets to choose what they learn when they learn, and I facilitate a learning environment. And I've had plenty of education to teach children many things for many years. And also I'm starting to offer breakout sessions for adults. So if you're wanting to learn how to sew or weld or swim, some adults don't know how to swim. Those are some of the things that I am offering teaching, and AutoCAD, because that's what I did for the last 7 years.
Yeah, and there again, that's one of the great things about freedom, is this sort of notion that you can throw something out there in the free market and then see if people like it. I mean, if people like the good or service that you're providing, then you do well, and if they don't, then you're punished and you go out of business and you start something new. I mean, that's another thing. The other side thinks it's such a horrible thing when a company goes out of business, and it's really not. It's just the market making a choice. And yeah, it's true. They look at it and say, wow, jobs are lost. What a horrible thing. But if you look a little closer, it's true that there's some jobs lost. But there's another company that steps up into the market and takes over. And like, for example, in the case of a restaurant, when a restaurant goes out of business, yeah, people lose jobs, but another restaurant then comes in. And if they do well and they stay in business, they start hiring people, and we start getting jobs, and we also now get a restaurant people actually wanted.
Could you imagine if all restaurants stayed in business, how awful it would be?
It'd be like the government constantly staying in business, right? How awful is that?
I have to remind people, you listen to KQCK radio station. This is the Attorney for Freedom show. And if you guys are calling in to harass me with these crazy questions, then I understand. But if these are real questions you guys are asking, we must have one hell of an audience out there that doesn't understand what's going on.
Can't wait to hear these. Go ahead.
Betsy Williams from New York City wants to know. She says, I was listening in the beginning of the show, and do I understand right? She said, and she was very passionate about this. She does not understand that you believe, especially after today's shooting, that people should really be able to own guns in the United States.
It's called Switzerland.
What?
Everybody in Switzerland has a gun, and they have the lowest crime rates.
I almost think it's a stand-up comedian calling me up until this woman's really serious.
It makes you wonder if they're really serious, doesn't it?
She was so serious, and you know what? I'm sorry. I don't really mean to be like cutting you down or anything, Betsy. I don't understand the other side.
But I mean, if Betsy doesn't want to have a gun, if Betsy doesn't like guns, I absolutely
stay away from them, Betsy.
I absolutely respect Betsy's choice to not own a gun. And if somebody breaks into her house, if her plan is to grab a baseball bat or call somebody with a gun to show up and protect her like a police officer, or just run away, that's how as long as she's a competent adult, that's how she wants to run her life, that's perfectly fine. But what on earth gives Betsy the right to tell another peaceful human being, like, say, me or Mike or someone else, that they can't have a gun if they choose to have a gun? And as long as they're peaceful with the gun, why can't they choose to have a gun? It's kind of like saying, people do bad things with cars, right? They drink, they drive, they lose control of their vehicle, they cause horrible accidents. I represent lots of people who do bad things with cars, but we don't blame the car. It's not the car's fault. It's the idiot who got drunk and couldn't control that 3,000 to 4,000 pound bullet, right, traveling through the road, traveling down the road. And so we don't have a call to ban cars, and I think there's about roughly the same amount of people who die from cars as die from guns.
No.
Well, what
many
happens?
more die from cars.
What
many,
happens?
Many more.
What happens when you outlaw guns? Who has the guns?
I mean, I know that's the other point. I mean, it's just such an obvious point, but I guess we got to deal with it. I mean, look, if you pass a law, Betsy, that says, look, everybody's going to turn in their guns, just like they did in Australia, maybe, the law-abiding people will, let's assume all of the law-abiding people will take their guns and turn them in, but who's not going to turn their guns in? I mean, the same people that are inclined to do bad things with guns, they're not inclined to follow the law and turn their guns in. So now what you have is an unarmed population and an armed bad guy population who can really feel empowered to do whatever they want with the now disarmed crowd of law-abiding people. I don't know why they think that's a better state of affairs.
I am really looking forward to the 3D printed guns, because once that happens, everybody's going to have one.
They've already done that. Did you hear that? They made one on a printer. They made a gun and fired it, and it worked.
Wow. I didn't know if it actually happened yet, but I knew they were working on it. Yep. Yeah, and now you can go buy a 3D printer for probably a couple $100 and build it yourself, and now you can print whatever part or
I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, technology keeps moving forward. It's kind of like people are going to have ways to hurt other people in society. There's always going to be technology. Bad guys are always going to have bad things to do. Really what we need to do is try to focus on changing hearts and minds to get people to adopt a more peaceful notion. And, that's one of the things I said in my article. Maybe why we have such a culture of violence is because we have such a disrespect for the notion that initiating force against non-aggressors is a bad thing. I mean, that seems to be a lost concept now in America. It seems to be, like we start out when you're 2 and you're 3 and you're playing with the other kids' toys. Everything seems so clear, right? You don't get a right. You don't get to play with someone else's toys without their permission, right? No one has a right to play with your toys either. You want to play with someone else's toys, what do? You got to ask them. You got to get the permission. But then you get older, and then democracy's introduced. And now you think it's okay to take someone's toys, whether they like it or not, as long as you can get all your friends, or at least the majority of your friends, to go ahead and agree with you. You can trespass all over them at any time. Everything is up for a vote. And to me, that's sort of an un-American. It's an anti-freedom. It's really an inhumane type of a policy. It's not pro-life. And I mean pro-life not in the abortion sense, in the general sense. It's not pro-humanity. It's a bad way to live. We need to get back to these notions of private property and respecting the rights of other people. And that's why, I love to talk about peace and promote peace, but to try to talk about peace while we still haven't figured out freedom, while we still haven't figured out that at least initiating force against our neighbors is a bad thing. That it's no surprise we have a culture of violence.
Yeah, Unschooling Arizona abides by the non-aggression principle. So whatever child I end up helping learn in the future, they will learn the non-aggression principle.
I mean, it's really all we're saying. Everything we're saying on this show really comes down to one thing. It's bad to initiate force against other people. Is that really so radical? I mean, everybody who disagrees with us, that's really what you're disagreeing with. All we're really saying is don't force yourself on other people. Let other people live their lives. If they're peaceful and they're not affecting you and they're not initiating force or trespassing on you, leave them alone.
Yeah.
Let them run their life. Why is that so complex? Why is that so horrible to accept? Why are we so crazy that we think simply not initiating force against people is that concept is a bad thing to be discouraged and outlawed and prohibited? Why are we so crazy that we believe that? I'd love to hear somebody call in and tell me, "Oh, Mark, that would never work. That's you in charge of you and me in charge of me. Oh my God, that would never work. What a radical notion." That's what you're saying. Everybody who's disagreeing with us, that's what you're saying. What you're saying is Alma in charge of Alma, Mark in charge of Mark, Joe in charge of Joe, and Mike in charge of Mike. That would never work. That seems ridiculous. It's too complex. It's radical. It's crazy. It would never work. And all we're saying is, no. we think it will work pretty well.
It's working right
well.
It's working right now.
It may not be perfect.
I'm in charge of myself. Are you in charge of yourself?
Absolutely.
Sweet.
It may not be perfect. It may not solve every problem. There are still questions about when one is trespassing on the other. I get all that. I'm not trying to paint a utopian picture here.
Well, there are bad people in the world.
There's bad people.
And they're raised
But why are they bad? Why are they bad?
Many
because
reasons.
they don't abide by what we just said.
Right.
They're bad because they do initiate force against other people. That's why
And
we're
not
calling
all of them work for the government.
We've got Ted out there from Niagara Falls that said everyone that is competent should be forced to own a gun. These people calling in, he says, I would like to know, can I buy the addresses and the phone numbers of these people that are calling in? Because when a revolution happens, that's where I want to go to get my supplies and food.
See, I would disagree with that, too. I wouldn't want to force somebody to own a gun if they didn't want to.
Absolutely
Of course not.
But I understand what he's saying.
He's just being a little radical there.
He is, but there was that town down in, was it Texas?
Yeah, no, you're talking about Kennesaw?
Kennesaw,
Georgia.
Kennesaw, Georgia, that passed a law that said the head of household must have a gun. Whether they did or not, who knows? But at least that was the law, and their crime rate went way
Is that
down.
the same place that said you're not allowed to dance on Sundays or something?
I heard that if they catch you in town without your gun, if you're a competent adult,
They shoot you?
No, they fine you, but they will write you a fine. They have the discretion to write you a fine. I don't know if they do it or not.
Isn't it interesting? Mike made an interesting observation. If this whole gun thing turns into some kind of a crazy civil war, and it's the people who want guns and have guns and own guns and refuse to give guns up, and on the other side is all the people without the gun. I don't know what that civil war
It's
looks
not gonna
like.
work. They're gonna have like tasers and knives, and you have to defend
It
yourself.
sort of seems to be
They're
some
going
kind
to
of
they're going to be bringing knives to a gunfight.
it's
Yeah.
some kind of an ironic type of a situation,
or
isn't
chain,
it?
a chain or something.
Yeah, something.
I certainly, by the way, hope it never comes to that.
Yeah.
My God.
Well, it's come to that many a times, and it's just so silly. I mean, and now that a gun exists, how are you going to make it not exist?
But this is exactly the same kind
Never.
of hysteria that always comes up when something bad happens, right? I mean, things bad happen in the world. Why is it that we so overreact in our country that, 9/11 happens? That was a horrible, maybe one of the worst tragedies ever, but boom, now comes the
And the
Patriot
biggest-
Act and the TSA and all
Oh.
Homeland Security and all this other stuff. And it's like some lunatic walks into a school and does a horrible thing. And now all of a sudden the gun thing is the top of the agenda. What happened to the war? What happened to the debt? What happened to all these other problems that are going on in the United States?
What I don't understand is because one lunatic does this, that means that everybody else that's law-abiding should have their rights taken away.
That's
You
like
know,
second
it's-
grade.
Yeah.
Now what are we teaching everybody? We're going to punish you for stuff you didn't do.
Yep.
We're going to punish you for stuff that somebody else did.
I saw something recently. I'm not sure what the situation was at the school, but these two boys got in some kind of fight, and the principal made them hold hands in front of the entire school sitting down. It was just completely humiliating for them. I mean, I don't really think forcing two people who don't like each other or just got in a fight to hold hands is really the best idea.
Maybe a good spanking would have been appropriate. I don't know. Go ahead, Joe. I can tell you're chomping at the bit over there.
We've got a few.
Poor Joe.
We're starting to get. I just want some realistic calls here. We've got Ted Niagara Falls says, everyone that is competent should. No, wait, that's the wrong one. Sorry, Jacob Kelly. After today's shooting, this must be a message that guns are a must. No one is taking my guns. Libertarian there, I guess, huh?
Yes.
Well, certainly a guy
At least in mind.
a guy who doesn't want to give up his guns. I
Yeah,
would
right.
At least say that about
Well, he
him.
believes he has the right to defend himself against somebody else with a
Yeah,
gun.
what a
Gee.
crazy idea that is, huh? The
That's
right to
crazy.
defend yourself.
Marilyn from San Clemente, California said, we should just ban everything. I mean everything.
Even food. Let's
Everything.
ban
I wrote an article last month, Joe, called "Ban Everything."
Did you
And
really?
it was just a satire on the whole thing.
Can we ban Monsanto
Marilyn,
food?
Yeah, we should.
Here's something I don't understand. I mean, and maybe this is just a guy thing. I don't know. But, Joe, you tell me if you feel any different. I mean, speaking as a man for a second, who has a wife and who has kids and who has a home, don't you want to be able to repel a bad guy, no matter how big and bad, no matter whether he's on crack or not, even if he comes with some of his friends? Don't you want to yourself have some opportunity, an opportunity? Maybe you don't get it done, I don't know. But don't you want to just have an opportunity to protect your family?
Heck, that second level on the western town is really just a place I could sit up there with my, my AK.
I can't even imagine. a man
Yeah.
who has a family to protect, not wanting to have some way to get to a gun. And again, I'm saying, look, be a responsible gun owner
Yeah.
like I am. Have it in a locked safe that nobody can get into, but that you can get to just in case it's an emergency. The thought of saying, as
You want to turn that over to the government.
I want to trust the government to defend my family. I mean,
What
I
a
think
coward. I find that cowardice.
I think it's great that I've got backup out there, right? That I could call 911 and that people are going to come and they're on my side and they're going to help me. I think that's fantastic. But to not take some responsibility for protecting my family, I don't know. I'm not saying that you have to. I just find it a little shocking and a little, frankly, disappointing
that you wouldn't want to.
that there's other guys out there that don't. I mean, I'd love to hear from them. What is it I'm missing? I mean, it's not a pounding my chest thing. I don't really care. I hope I never have to take out my gun. I don't ever want to have to shoot anybody. But if I did, if somebody showed up and they were there to do bad things to my kids or my wife, my family, take my property, I want to at least know that I got an opportunity to defend myself. Why is that so horrible?
We've got Dave out there on the chat that says Sandy Hook was a false flag operation by the government. Look at the proof. The coroner said the children died of rifle ammo, but the ammo the attacker had he only had handguns. The rifle shotguns were locked up.
I've heard these kinds of things, and
there's a lot of different.
But I think, look, if not Sandy Hook, it'll be some other guy. There's another guy coming, crazy guy with a gun, who's going to go somewhere. There'll be unarmed people, and he's going to shoot them. Why don't we get armed people there? And I'm not saying everybody has to run around, but if you're a bad guy, shouldn't you at least have the fear that maybe, just maybe, one of these people out there is packing heat? One of those people out there might reach down and grab their 40 with the hollow tips, like I would have done, and blow the guy away before he shoots 26.
Curtis from Philly says, "This is a great show. Please don't get disappointed or tainted by the crazies who believe in the man. We will eventually be free and win." Thanks, Mr. Victor.
Yeah, right. Well, you're welcome, and it's a joy to still have a microphone, and it's really, Joe's putting us on the air here, and so the thanks really go to Joe. And it's awesome to have a forum, and I see it kind of as our mission. It is a tough time for freedom. Okay, I'm optimistic. I think times are going to be better, but look, it would be dishonest to say it's not a tough time for freedom. It's a tough time for freedom, but that's kind of what our role is, right? I mean, and to some sense, always through humanity, it's been a tough time for freedom. It's always a fight, right, Thomas?
But I see a positive because a lot of things we've already talked about. The Free State Project, but you have things. You've got Freedom Fest and Libertopia and all these freedom programs. People getting together and talking about this. That's a positive sign.
There's lots of, but the founders I thought were very realistic about this. There was kind of like, here's your republic if you can keep it. Mm-hmm. Jefferson, I mean, we should have a revolution every 20 years. Government's a necessary evil. These were the types of things that our founders knew. They knew they were sort of swimming upstream against the general history of our planet. And so maybe it's our moral responsibility, not legal responsibility, because you don't have to do anything, but maybe there's a moral responsibility for the generations that came before us who fought for freedom and for the generations that are yet to come to try to do our best, to try to change hearts and minds, to try to move humanity forward, to try to promote freedom and promote peace. Because that's what we're really saying. When we say promote freedom, we're trying to promote peace. We're trying to promote a society where people recognize the rights of other people. People don't intrude on the rights of other people, and it's not a utopia. We'd like to get as close as we can to a utopia. Perfect. I'm perfectly happy with that, but we're never going to get
maybe
there.
many utopias, like very small, self-sustainable community utopias who have different ways of living because they choose to live that way, which I think is kind of what the founding fathers had in mind. But then it just all got big.
There is no centralized plan to freedom. That's a good point you made. There is no centralized plan. Everybody's got their own idea of what that is.
Yeah, and I think that you got to remember, of course, the Constitution was sort of a counter-revolution to the American Revolution. I mean, remember, we didn't start with the Constitution. We started with the Articles of Confederation that had a very, very loose, very weak central government that really wasn't capable of doing very much. And so I think that what the founders were thinking about is let's get some competition among governments. That's a great idea to me, because that way the transaction cost of moving from one to the next isn't so very high. And there's this tendency to sort of centralize power. And so it doesn't take long before the Constitution comes in and the Hamiltonian crowd comes in and said, let's centralize power. Let's build this big centralized government. And yet still, now there's this move by the power grabbers still constantly to make one world government.
What about a voluntary government?
I'm in favor of as much voluntary as we can possibly get, which is really most things. I mean, you start getting down to some of the finer points of this, and it's true that we do want to impose at least a notion of private property on people, right? I'm in charge of me, you're in charge of you. Some people say, no, I don't like that system. We're sort of wanting to impose that notion, and so I'll concede that. But that's, to me, if you don't think you own yourself, I don't see how you get very far in the world, because if you don't own yourself, someone else could just simply lay a claim, and if somebody else lays a claim, I suspect at some point you're going to assert a claim of ownership. So I'm not sure I believe anybody who says I don't even assert a claim of ownership over myself. Yeah.
Wilhelmina Russo is sitting with a group of 31 ladies. She's an activist for product safety, and she says, well, don't you agree, Mark Victor, that we should have the government to warn us of bad things such as high fructose corn syrup, cigarettes, and things that are not safe, such as bad tires? How would we regulate products and such to keep safe?
It's a great question. And I am in favor of a tort system. We need a tort system. When companies build products that are unsafe, that don't do what they're supposed to do, we need to shake that out in a court of law. We need to have that. But to think that only the government could act as sort of the warning system on bad products, is, especially in the age of the internet, I think is a bit short-sighted, because even without any kind of even without any consumer reports today, right? And we have lots of that stuff, but without any of that, I'd be willing to bet that take McDonald's, for example. If McDonald's just decided, hey, we can save $1, let's buy cheaper meat, so very close to rancid,
like
or maybe
like the pink slime meat.
Let's just buy some really bad, low-end, the kind of meat that gets people sick or diseased, that kind of thing. I really don't think it would take very long for the word to get out that McDonald's is putting a bad product out there, especially with Twitter and Facebook and everything else. And I can promise you, if the government ever got completely out of the business of sort of keeping tabs on products, there would be lots of private companies. We already have them.
People might wake up a little bit more,
We have lots of private companies that come in and do testing and checking. For example, the FDA. People think that, oh my God, testing of drugs and all this other stuff is really important. Well, it is an important thing. But if the FDA just sort of stepped out of the market, there would absolutely be lots of information about every single drug coming to the market, and then people can make choices. If somebody's on the verge of death, like we have every day, someone's on the verge of death and waiting for some potentially miracle cure that's not through the FDA's approval process, and they die, and then the FDA, 5 minutes after they're dead, says, hey, we approve this drug. Well, sorry, that poor guy lost out. That person might want to take more of a risk. They may want to say, hey, look, I've been diagnosed terminal. I will take a risk of something that has not been very well tested. But, you may get other people out there that even just because the FDA says it's safe, and we've got lots of lawsuits going on right now on lots of drugs that the FDA has said are safe that turned out to not be safe. So, again, take some responsibility over what you put in your body. It's your body. Use your brain. That's why you have it. And make decisions over your own life and take responsibility.
I think it's really important to know certain things, like where your milk is coming from, where your eggs are coming from, where your food is coming from. So if you can find local, natural growing farms in your area, you can purchase products from them. And then you know what they're spraying or what they're pumping their food full of.
And I agree, by the way, with the last lady who called, with things like the high fructose corn syrup and the tobacco and trans fatty acids and things like that. I can promise you those things kill way more people than guns and cars put together.
Don't eat processed foods. Eat all natural foods from a garden. If you're really worried about what you're putting in your body, you should know where these things are coming from.
Yeah, and there again, that's the beauty of freedom. If you want to find out really anything about anything, you're less than 5 minutes away. Get on the internet. If you've got some drug that you're curious about, get on the internet and put some, there again, you got to make choices. Well, here's a source. This is WebMD or Wikipedia, something that has a little bit more credibility. And then here's, Joe down at the corner who says, here's what I think about that. You got to make choices. You got to make decisions. Use your brain. That's what a free world is about.
And somebody out there in the chat says the FDA does not test drugs. They rely on the drug manufacturers to supply them the data.
Absolutely. And it's just like saying the government doesn't make roads either. Everybody thinks the government builds roads. The government doesn't do any of this stuff.
Well, we have flying cars. They're called helicopters.
And it's funny
they
because
hire private contractors to do all this stuff.
And if you watch, a fair amount of TV, even just a little bit of TV, you're going to see during that time, hey, buy Cymbalta. Oh, by the way. And then you'll hear really quietly, may cause brain seizures, brain tumors, fatalities, strokes, death, your liver falling out, your feet, everything.
My personal opinion, even speaking as a lawyer, some of that stuff is because we have tort system gone amok. Some of that stuff is, my God, everybody can be sued for everything today. And I'm not saying we need tort reform either. I don't want to get off on a tangent here. But we do need to have responsible jurors. If people on juries are awarding these crazy verdicts because they think companies ought to be insurers of everything, to some extent, life happens. And not every manufacturer is responsible for everything that ever goes wrong at any time. We need to have people who are using a little bit more common sense. And again, it just comes down to using your brain and not just being knee-jerked person who reacts to just everything.
And Lenny from Santa Cruz, New Mexico said, please make sure you give out the contact info again for the business group of the young lady.
Wow.
AgoristMarketplace.com and also JackalopefreedomFestival.com. And you can find Unschooling Arizona on Facebook. My website's in the works.
Why don't you go ahead and spell that real quick?
Yeah, I was just going to say.
AGORIST Marketplace.
Agorist Marketplace. And if you can always get a hold of me at attorneyforfreedom.com, and I will direct you to Alma's site or whatever else you need directing to, I suppose.
And while we were on the subject of guns, I forgot to give out the address of Ernie's.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Safegunowners.org is the web address, and we'll talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, that's Second Amendment is for everybody, and Ernie Hancock, who's been on this show, is putting together a sort of gun summit, and you can always get information on what Ernie's up to, and this is one of those other things going on in the freedom world at Freedom's Phoenix, Freedoms with an X, Phoenix.com, and Ernie's always posting the things going on in the pro-freedom world there. It's a great website to check out. He runs anything going on that he's aware of, which are most things going on in the freedom world in the United States.
We got to get his banner up, don't we? We gotta do that.
People, that's part of what we're trying. Mike and I are sort of starting a business, the Freedom Network. We're just barely starting. It's in its idea phase, but the concept is we want pro-freedom people to do business with other pro-freedom people.
As long as you're not going to sell it to Al-Qaeda.
Probably not.
Right?
No, I don't
like
think
the government does.
They're not very pro-freedom. But, we think it makes sense for people who support freedom to do business with other people who support freedom. If you got a choice. If you got a choice to spend your money with people who are out there promoting freedom, you should. If you're for freedom, and I certainly feel that way. I mean, if I need to hire a plumber, and I can hire anybody, I would choose somebody who's out there promoting freedom in some way. I think it's I feel like it's my moral responsibility as an American, especially in a tough time for freedom. And it's also a great way to meet other pro-freedom people and find out what they're up to, and maybe even make another friend.
Yep,
absolutely.
It's funny, every time I make a comment, somebody throws something up on it. Somebody said Obama just sent 20 F-16s to Al-Qaeda. These people are full of knowledge. Knowledge is what it is out
We've
there.
We've been arming Al-Qaeda
forever.
I
don't think there are a lot of shows like our show. I mean, I just don't. I mean, there are some shows out there that claim to be for freedom that aren't really for freedom. Everybody says they're for freedom. I mean, are you really for freedom? I mean, people have these little hang-ups. We should do the hang-up show sometime, right? Yeah. We should do a show. Maybe we'll do this next week. We ought to do a show of things that people who say they're for freedom, they're not really for freedom about.
Like the email. You don't have to give any names, but like the email you got, with a guy claiming he was for freedom, but he wanted to force religion on people.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the drug war. I got an email from a guy, supposedly a big freedom guy, who was really offended that I said something negative about the drug war. And in fact, remember his comment? He said, we ought to treat drugs like like China treats them, which is you use them, you die. And then he says,
what a great freedom
And he says China doesn't have any drug problem. And of course, I wasn't all that. I got to confess, I wasn't all that acquainted with the drug situation. But I sort of suspected it's not all that different than anywhere else. And so it took me about 10 seconds to do a little bit of research to find out China has a huge drug problem. And I forget how many kilos of marijuana, hundreds of thousands of kilos of marijuana were seized in China, and all these other problems with heroin and meth and everything else.
But even with that aside, would you really want to live like China? Is the question. You call yourself a freedom person, but you're saying you want to live like China lives, where they kill you for, having a joint? Come on.
Maybe we ought to do the "Are you really for freedom" show.
Yeah.
Are you really
idea.
for freedom? And come up with all the things that people are uncomfortable about. People. Like I've said, everybody's always for freedom when other people are using their freedoms in ways that they themselves agree with and doesn't offend them in any way. Big deal. The pot smokers being for legalization of marijuana. Big deal. The gay guy who's for gay rights. Big deal. I'm unimpressed with that. But the non-pot smoker who supports the rights of people to smoke marijuana, the straight guy who supports the rights of gay people to live however the heck they want to live, that's a more impressive position to me, a much more impressive position. So, maybe we should talk even immigration. I think it's a slightly more complex topic, but we probably should talk about immigration as well.
It's funny. I was just talking to the director of Border Narcotics, and of course it came up. I said, well, I have to ask you, what's your take on this medical marijuana thing? And he looked at me and he went, and I didn't expect this, and he said, I think it's an absolutely senseless war. It's ridiculous.
Well,
of course it should be legalized. He said, of course it should be legalized.
I would love somebody to call in or even come on the show who's going to tell me about the drug wars going great. It's going fan. We're going to win at any time. I mean, nobody takes that position. I talk to DEA guys all the time, and I say, are we going to win? How's it going? We're going to win any time ever? And they just smile. They laugh. They say, you know what they say to me? They say, it's a job.
I love immigrants because most of them are natural agorists. They come here and they create a business for themselves. Even if it's pushing a cart full of popsicles down the street, I'm pretty sure you can trade something with him or give him silver or gold. I'm sure he will accept it. That's an agorist right there.
I've represented lots of people who have come to the United States illegally, and generally are charged with the crime of coming to the United States illegally. Other than that, they're peaceful, law-abiding in every other way, and productive, and they just want to do what everyone else wants to do, which is make a living and support your kids.
They're charged with the crime of walking while Mexican?
Yeah, being here. And they're good Americans. I don't know what the big problem is. I mean, they help support the economy. I mean, look, I wouldn't give them anything, right? Nobody should get anything. Nobody ever, whether you're a citizen or a non-citizen, no human being has the right to live at the expense of another human being. Why can't we just, is that so radically crazy? I don't know. Maybe
you're crazy.
Maybe I'm going to find out someday, Joe, I really am crazy, and all this stuff really is nuts, and it is impossible, but it just seems to me that nobody ought to have a claim to live at the expense of another person.
Let's take a second and tell people about the Jackalope Fest that's going on before we forget about that.
I talked about it already.
Oh, you did?
I did.
must have been on the phone.
You might
I'm sorry.
Been.
Yeah.
Well, when is the next one?
It's the first weekend of August.
And where is it?
It's in northern Arizona, just east of Payson.
And if you want to go, how do you figure out where to go and all that?
JackalopefreedomFestival.com.
Does the government send free buses to pick you up or no? Oh, gotcha.
You have to find your own ride there.
And you know what? I was there last year, and it was a good time, and it looked like everybody was having a blast. The area was awesome. People were doing what they wanted to do. People brought quads.
Nice.
People are probably wondering, if there's no money involved, how do you get things like porta potties there? Well, we started a chip-in. Somebody volunteered to start a chip-in. We raised the money and we got porta potties. So next year, maybe we'll actually have showers. I plan on camping for a whole week next year. I can't wait. Actually, it's this year now.
And if there are no showers, I'll go ahead and donate my time to hose the ladies down if they need to be cleaned up a little bit.
You're so kind.
I mean, I want to do my part.
So
I'm sure you can make money out
I
of
want to do
that.
I will not charge if they're attractive.
Well, maybe you could take donations.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Freedom at its best.
At its best.
Consenting adults agreeing to do whatever they want to do. Nothing wrong with it. All right, Joe, so we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do next week. Hopefully guns will not be on the forefront. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not really a gun guy. I respect the rights of everybody to have guns. But to me, they're just tools. But we're in a time in America where this thing may become the next very polarizing issue, and maybe it'll be a good thing, as Mike suggested.
I've had a lot of calls in the last couple of weeks to tell you to bring on a politician.
Oh, I would love it.
Or two, or whatever. And I think we should do that.
Well, we're always open for
bring
that.
a politician, any politician. Who wants to come on the show?
Let's find one in the next
I mean,
week.
they're pretty much fungible, right? They're pretty much all the same. They love the government. They want more government. Everything they're doing is critically indispensable to everything. They all say they claim they're for freedom. They're all going to solve everybody's problems.
I challenge McCain.
I challenge Jeff Flake. Jeff Flake, are you out there?
That's a good one. Jeff Flake. Yeah. I'd like to see that.
I know Douglas Wolf, our Pinal County tax assessor, is really looking forward to coming on.
Oh, bring him on.
Well, for those who don't know, I ran for United States Senate against Jeff Flake and Rich Carmona here in Arizona. We got in one debate on the PBS channel, and I was invited to participate in a very even-handed, very fair debate. And Mike, who was watching the debate at you could actually watch this. I'm sure it's still. How do you find the debate?
Go on YouTube and just type in Mark Victor Jeff Flake. It'll come right up.
Yeah, and it was a U.S. Senate debate. It was the only debate they let me in, and I felt like I was debating Mr. Carmona, Mr. Flake, and Mr. Moderator all at the same time, because it was, now let's hear from the Republican, then the Democrat, then the Republican, then the Democrat. Here's the Libertarian. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And now back to the Republican.
Mark was supervising, he would say, okay.
It's so sad that you have to say, let me in. Like, you need their permission to debate against them.
Well, I don't blame them. They didn't want somebody asking real questions like, for example, what departments of the federal government would you cut?
Right, Mark's the real loose cannon crazy guy around here.
Yeah,
you didn't know that?
I have all kinds of crazy views, like people ought to be in charge of themselves and people shouldn't get to live at the expense of other people. I'm a radical lunatic, I suppose.
Freedom. So Ernie always says, freedom's the answer. What's the question? And that is just perfect. It's if you think about that every single time, and you're talking about a freedom issue, whatever it is, and you realize that you're saying, well, I think we need to make people do this, then you're taking a stance of control over another person's life. And the second you do that, freedom is not the answer in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is what we're promoting here is actually kind of it should be an easy sell, right? What are we trying to convince you of? That you should be in charge of your own life. And it's like them saying, no, I don't want to be in charge of my own life. Somebody's got to be in charge of me. Somebody's got to tell me what to do. And we're saying, no. You can really, as long as you don't hurt another person, you can be in charge of not just your whole body, but your money and your time and your property. Like, you're in charge of your life. And they're saying, I don't know if that would work.
And 3 out of 4 phone calls I pick up, they start with, you mean to tell me that you think that, I mean, come on.
But you know what? We're getting them thinking, Joe.
Yes, that's right.
We're getting them thinking, and that's all we can do. All we can do is get people to, folks, just think about it for a second. Imagine what life would be like if you were completely in charge of you. You were in charge of your body. You could decide how to use it, where you slept, who you slept with, what you ate, what you drank, who you lived with, your money, what you spent it on and what you didn't spend it on, who you wanted to trade with and who you didn't want to trade with, how you could use all of your toys, where you work, what the deal is you strike.
Even if you wanted to abuse it.
Even if you wanted to, you get to decide how to use or abuse. Because I agree with those ladies who called in early. That high fructose corn syrup and those saturated fats, and that's pretty bad stuff.
Yeah.
But you know what? I disagree with the mayor of New York. If you want to drink that big, horribly sugary drink, which I never do, that's your choice as a free person in a free country. Just think about it, folks. Imagine what it would be like to be free.
You could quit drinking water and just drink Cokes all day long and all night long.
Take us out on that note, Joe.
Sounds like a plan.
Ladies and gentlemen, imagine what it would be like to be free. And we'll see you next week.
At the same time, Thursdays at 1. Here we go.
Freedom is the answer. What's the question? You have been listening to the Attorney for Freedom radio show, hosted by the original man of peace and high-profile attorney for freedom, Mark J. Victor. See you next week, same time, for another dose of freedom. Until then, peace out.